we call upon Mr. Brain Mac Mahon, who makes us an expert in digital storytelling and future marketing. He is the founder of Expert DOJO to talk more on this. So Brain Mahon is the founder of Expert DOJO, the largest startup high-performance center for entrepreneurs in Southern California. He has consulted and coached in over 35 countries, so he brings a global perspective to starting and growing your small businesses. So with no further delay, we call upon Mr. Brain for starting up the session.
What I really want to talk about today is how do we create a great brand that helps us then create a great influence level that helps us create a great story. Let me give a little bit of background first so you can see who I am. It was a very nice introduction, thank you. But I've been in small business, entrepreneurship, marketing, and acceleration of companies for the past 25 years. And I've done this over about 30 countries or so, and each of those countries I owned either the same business or a different business that I went into. So by the time I actually made it through from the beginning all the way through to now, over all these countries that I was and over all these companies that I owned, I always knew that business development was the most important, or I always felt that business development was the most important part of starting your business. And what happened to me over a period of time was that brand became the absolute core component of not only everything I had in my business, but also when I started an accelerator in Southern California, the absolute core cornerstone of everything that I taught in the accelerator. And it started one day, and it was during this conference, and this exact same conference was held in Santa Monica about 3 years ago, and we held it in the Lowe's Hotel, and we did a talk, and the talk was on, it wasn't storytelling, but it was about brand, and how do you create an authentic brand? And I got asked a question about 3/4 way through when somebody asked, what advice do you give when creating an authentic brand? And that in itself, for me, spoke absolute volumes, because we have a time right now where it has never, ever, ever been more important to be authentic about how we feel. And authentic means that we're not trying to remember how we should feel so we can explain it to somebody so it fits into their definition of what a brand should look like. It should be something which comes organically and naturally from me. And from that moment, I became absolutely obsessed with brand. And we subsequently opened, or maybe even a little bit before that, an accelerator for early stage startups in Santa Monica in California. And I think at this stage, we've had about 1,200, 1,300 companies go through our program from the beginning. So my reason for sharing this little bit at the beginning for you is I have something which I think is almost more important than expertise on some levels. I have context based on so many companies going through our program that we just have a really good feel as to what makes them successful or what doesn't. So I want to share a lot of that today. Now, before I think we can go into the storytelling and even going into the brand, I want to talk a little bit about an area which isn't really discussed a lot in this context, but it's terribly important. And that's what I call the influence score. And this is what I hope to bring you, really, if you're going to walk away from this conference and say, I've learned something, it may be some things about the brand. I hope you do get some from the brand. And it may be on how do I create a story. But where I really want you to get the maximum benefit is on how do I create the right influencer level so that actually my brand and my story have got a level of relevance to them. Now, when I say influence level, let me give you a great example. Yesterday, it was announced in LA that the youngest billionaire in Los Angeles in America is a young lady called Kylie Jenner. Now, Kylie Jenner is extremely famous for being part of the Jenner family or part of the Kardashians family, whichever that you imagine. And whether we like the Kardashians or whether we don't like the Kardashians, what we have to acknowledge is that they use their influence level to an extreme extent. So creating a brand with that influence level and then creating a story to go with that brand became extremely simple. So how did she become a billionaire? Well, she started off, I mean, on top of everything that she does in television, she started off a cosmetics brand. And within the cosmetics brand, she used her influence and then she used her brand to create a story around the actual cosmetics themselves. And rather than her as the brand saying, we want to sell you these cosmetics because we feel these cosmetics are the absolute best for you, she said, as a brand, we want to understand from our audience what you believe is the best for you. And what happened next was insane. Her social blew up, the brand blew up. People started saying, I want to have these blues and these reds, and I want to have such a natural ingredient for the skin. And within the context and round parameters of what she was offering, she didn't change that much. But people felt they were listened to. And I think that's a forgotten context of storytelling a lot. We believe that storytelling is about being a very large company, having a very clever video that we put together, maybe a Dollar Shave Club type video, sending that story out to the world, and then the world comes back to us and tells us how incredibly engaging we are, how clever we are, what a phenomenal story we put together, and then we all clap and tell each other how amazing that a job we've done in a particular marketing campaign. And I want to suggest that when you have your influence level at the right level, the actual storytelling becomes not the storytelling that you make, it's the storytelling that actually comes from the consumers that love your product. As I said, she did it to a phenomenal level in an incredibly bright way. And I've seen just great brand after great brand do exactly the same thing. I'm not sure if many of you know Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a great guy. He's been over to our premises a couple of times to do some talks. And what I loved about him was that, again, the same. He worked on his influence level first. I'm going to keep reinforcing this. And what I want to do actually during this conference is to be able to give you some tips about how you can increase your influence level. Because otherwise, you're going to say to me, Brian, this is great, but you're actually beginning to really annoy me now because I'm not Gary Vaynerchuk and I'm not the Kardashians or the Jenners or anybody else. My influence level is not in the same place. So I am going to give you some tips about what we do in the accelerator to actually get your influence level up to a level that you can really not just get a story out, but have a mass of people actually react to that story. But I always loved Gary Vaynerchuk because right from the beginning, his authenticity was there. He understood the people that he wanted to deal with. He didn't try and reach out to a segment of the audience that he knew he wasn't good at. He focused very specifically on the area of the people that he felt not only had a huge problem, and that's where brand comes in. Are you solving a problem that they have? And are you clearly letting your audience know what solution that you have to actually help solve that problem? And he did. He picked up the absolute perfect audience group. He started explaining to them on a level that spoke to them, not at them. So he didn't speak to them like this, where he was sitting up and saying, I'm going to explain to you how it's going to happen. He was there, in the middle of the audience almost, sharing with people so that people felt that he was speaking personally to them. And then as he did that more and more, people liked him more and more. As they liked him more and more, he increased his influence level more and more. Now, I want to, as we go through the talk, I don't like slides. I've never liked slides. I feel that it's very hard to have a conversation, and even though I can't see you, I do know that you're there, and I do feel that you're there. So when I'm having this conversation, I really feel like I'm sitting here and I'm talking to my best friend, and my best friend has got a company, and they're desperately trying to get their brand out, and I want to make sure that in this 30 or 45 minutes that we have, that you get the absolute maximum that you can possibly get. So we actually have one of our customers over, one of our cohort, I should say, over in the dojo, over at Expert DOJO or Accelerator. She was looking to create a brand and a story like this. And very much like many of you listening here on the call, where you think, well, I want to get my product and get it right. And she didn't have a high influence level. She had a low influence level, but she had created a cosmetics which was natural, it was toxin free, it was good for your skin, it was homemade, and people loved it and they really liked it. But she was from Egypt, and I said to her when she first came in, like, what's so special about what it is that you make. And she said, well, my granny passed this down, and her granny passed it down to her, and her granny to her. And these recipes that we've had to keep women and men's skin young and beautiful, we've had in our family for centuries. The product was called Dulce Plana, but very, very beautiful story that she had. And then we looked at ancient Egypt, and of course, I'm an Irish guy, but I know a little bit about history, and especially about the history that we all like. And I couldn't stop thinking about Cleopatra and the natural beauty of Cleopatra. And look, maybe Cleopatra didn't even have the natural beauty that we imagine they have, but in our minds, it's a very easy and clean image for us to be able to get to work out that, yes, this is something that we can relate to. And relating is everything. If we can't get the relating to it, it becomes extremely difficult. So she created this whole image around Cleopatra. And then we created a campaign which was about, we're trying to find Cleopatra. Who's Cleopatra? And then offered a year long of supplies for whoever became the Cleopatra, so that her skin could stay as natural and as beautiful as it was. And the messaging in this was extremely important, because if we take Cleopatra, we imagine she's natural. Now this tied really nice into the message that actually Hannah had with her brand herself. She wanted to make sure that it was extremely tied, not to fake or plastic women or men, or people who put on lots of makeup so they can cover up things that they want to cover up. This was about taking the natural beauty and pushing it out. So she created this story, which was not the Cleopatra of 1,000 years ago, but she created the story of the Cleopatra of today, and how that Cleopatra actually then turns into something that everybody of today can relate to. And I'm sure within everybody's product who's on the phone here, I'm absolutely positive you have exactly that Cleopatra type feel where people can relate to as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back to some more examples in a little while. But I do want to look at maybe some tips to help improve your influence level. And I want to, within the tips, I want to give you some context as well. So when I've lived in 35 countries or maybe 40 countries, and that's good news and it's bad news. It's good news because I've had the privilege of living around the world for most of my life. It is bad news because it's extremely high to get a local influence level, at least a high local influence level, if you're in so many countries and then you're new in a new country. So when I first arrived in Los Angeles about 4 years ago, I knew nobody. But I knew that if I wanted to create an accelerator, which was going to be the best accelerator in the world in my mind, and in my mind, by the way, that story didn't mean the biggest accelerator. It meant the accelerator that changed the lives of more entrepreneurs than any other accelerator. So I knew to do that, I needed to improve my influence level. So like me, there are many ways that you could do it. I started it off, people who are ever with me will always notice there's a pay it forward bracelet on my wrist all the time. I started off by arranging pay it forward events where we would bring in the highest level investors in the community, and then we would bring in startups who really needed investors, and then we would put them together in a mentorship forum. And I didn't even charge at that stage because it wasn't about charging money. It was about building my influence level by providing value to the startups and the investors that I needed to be in my community afterwards. So I find events as a really good way of doing it. And it's so easy to arrange events these days. Whether you use, Meetup over in the States is a huge tool. Eventbrite, which is now global, is a huge tool. It doesn't even need to cost you money to arrange an event. But what you have to do, really important, I see so many people randomly arranging an event just for the sake of arranging an event. You have to make sure that the event ties really deeply into your brand message, okay? So events, yes, very good for your influence level. Make sure it's tied into your brand message. For me, it was very closely aligned. Now, at the same time, I know that there's only one of me, and if I just do one event, that's not going to be enough. And also, it was just one segment of the audience. So I knew that for me to really help our startups, I needed to be out there with the high-level people in the community. And although on many levels, I am not a great fan of Chamber of Commerce's, I am a huge fan of targeted working with the Chamber of Commerce for an objective. So I got into the Chamber of Commerce, I was on the board within 6 months, and then, hey presto, I now know every single high-level person in Santa Monica. Okay, so what comes next? Because we've got to make sure, this is an online conference, so we have to make sure that actually we have some online components here as well. How many people are following you on Quora, are upvoting you on Quora, on Medium? What's your presence like on Medium? Like, for example, in the Entrepreneurship Society, Reddit has a huge group, which is called AMA, Ask Me Anything. How many questions am I getting back when I post here? And the really, really interesting thing about kind of how this all pulls together is that everything is quantifiable. And what we started doing over at Expert Dojo was to look at the score of the entrepreneurs at the beginning and then measure specific aspects of what they're doing. So for example, in Instagram, I think the first question I was asked in Instagram was, would you like some fake followers? And it became so hard to say no because everybody else is taking fake followers. Now, I did say no because my authentic brand would not allow me to look an entrepreneur in the face if I was lying about the followers I have. But many people on this call today, on this conference today, will have fake followers because it was just given to you. So maybe rather than measuring the followers, which we know doesn't mean anything, maybe we measure the engagement of the followers. Maybe we look and say, if we have 5,000 followers, but our engagement is, say, 500 shares or 500 people liking, then that engagement is much higher. So we measure everything, and I won't do all of the influencer stuff now. Let me come backwards and forwards. I want to talk about brand for a little bit as well. But I do want you to really start looking at this. I suppose if I backtrack a little bit, a lot of the time people do tasks. And we do tasks because we feel like tasks need to be done. So we wake up in the morning and we post something on Twitter, and we wake up and then in the afternoon we put something on Facebook, and maybe we'll do some shares on Facebook, and we'll go into LinkedIn and put a post on LinkedIn as well. And then all of these things are just tasks. They're activities. They're things that we're doing. And although they're valuable, because it's better to do things than not to do things, they're not specifically targeted, measured tasks. And that's why I really like what we put together on the influencer score, where we could actually look and measure every single one of these tasks that you're doing. So I just want, when you're doing these stories, just think how much easier it is to get your brand message out in a beautiful story which impacts entrepreneurs or impacts whatever your target segment is in a really powerful way. Okay? And then let's see how we can measure that. So imagine waking up a month later and saying, great, last month my influence score was only 3%. This month I'm at 4.5% because I've managed to do these tasks and push our way up. So I'm going to come back to a few more afterwards. I'll talk about writing a book. I'm going to talk about TEDx talks and those impacts. I'm going to talk about LinkedIn and the impact there, and a number of other areas as well. But I do want to just take it back to brand for a second, because I love brand. It is everything. If you don't have brand, and I mean real brand, I don't mean a brand that you can sit in a bar with your friends in the evening and talk about how great your company is. I mean a brand that your consumer looks at your brand and they specifically know what it is that makes you different. Now, I would say at the dojo, this is our brand. This is our brand logo, right? So it's the face of a ninja, and then it's the name Expert Dojo, which is written underneath that. Now, how did we come up with that name, and what was the story behind that name, and why is it so terribly important? Because it has to be something that your customers feel. And when I was down in LA at the beginning, I felt, or Los Angeles, I felt that a lot of the mentors and the experts who were in the local area, and I don't want to say they weren't experts, but I will say there's a lot of fluff in this world, and there's a lot of people who pretend they do things. And the expertise that was supposed to be there, I felt, and many other people felt, especially the entrepreneurs, they weren't there. So I thought to myself, maybe there is no expert. Maybe I'm not an expert and you're not an expert. We're just people who have got certain areas of expertise that we've learned, but we can get better and better and better and better at all of those areas of expertise. But we have to want to. The minute we say that we're experts, it's over, because now we feel like we've learned enough. So as we were looking at this concept and we were looking at the problem that was facing our entrepreneurs, we came up with the idea of a dojo. And a dojo is a place of continual learning. There is a master, but the master is the student. We just keep getting better and better and better. Now, this was really important in our space because we knew entrepreneurs were failing at a level of 95% within the tech space. Now, if they're failing at 95%, we want to make sure that we actually are part of that problem for them. Not that we're creating a cool name. Not that we've got the right font or that the colors are right. Like, all of those things are important, but they're secondary important. The most important thing is that the consumers, the avatar, the perfect low-hanging fruit that is going to buy your product is spoken to as personally as I am speaking to you right now at this conference. That they feel that you care about them with the product that's coming through. So if we had just said, hey man, we're the greatest experts in the world, is that authentic? No. Is it congruent with the message that we believed at the start? No, none of the above. We needed to make sure it spoke specifically to a problem that we wanted to fix ourselves. And that's how Expert Dojo became born. It's a place of expertise where nobody is ever an expert. We just continually grow to get better and better and better. And then we share that expertise as a community. And that allowed us then to build the pillars that made our business strong. And then from that, here's what's so wonderful is you don't really need to create the stories in many cases. The stories become self-evident. Because if you have a very, very strong brand with strong core beliefs in that brand, and our core beliefs were entrepreneur comes first, success comes first. Not unicorn success. We don't care about that. There's plenty of unicorns out there. But actual measured success where people can build differences that make a difference in the world. And then that became part of our entire brand, if not the central part of the brand. So I urge everybody who's listening here, if you have a brand, really question, is that brand speaking to the avatar that you have? Is it speaking to the avatar maybe that you had 12 months ago? When we first started, we were sure our avatar was a 22-year-old middle-class guy in Santa Monica, our AB city, which was similar to Santa Monica. What actually happened was our avatar became, about 6-9 months later, a 36 to a 44-year-old woman who has either been in the workforce before, but generally people who are starting a business the first time. Now, how did that happen? Because we realized that, yeah, we have expertise, and yeah, we can help 22-year-old guys who are starting a business, but we're looking at our whole space is about trying to find the people we can help the most. And the people we could help the most were those women because they helped us by being experts within areas they knew and then wanting help in areas that they also knew they needed help in. So as you're looking at your brand, and this is your story as well, you make sure that not only do you look at that story through the eyes of your consumer, but change it every 6 months. Now, I'm going to tell you another thing that might surprise you a little bit. Who do you think changes our brand every 6 months? Do you think I sit and have a brand discussion about who our consumer is? No, I do not. I actually do not take part in the conversation at all. You know why? Because I am too close to the conversation. I'm too close. If I get involved in a brand conversation, I am so deeply engrossed in Expert Dojo and what we do and what I care about because it's my company and I started it, that I can't look beyond that. It's too hard. We actually get, and I don't necessarily recommend this, but it has certainly been good for us, but I actually get our interns to come together in the summer and then they'll work with 2 or 3 members of our team and they'll help create the brand that's going to go forward. What we then do with that is we will then take that brand and we will make sure that it speaks to the audience either by changing the website. It doesn't mean spending a lot of money doing it, but it does mean watching this. This is the only real currency you have, by the way. is people coming on your website, are hearing your brand message, and really understanding what it is that you as a company do. If you don't have your brand right, you will never, ever get your storytelling right. So make sure that you relook at your brand every 6 months. Make sure that, in the words of Simon Sinek, who's another great hero of mine, I love how he managed to pinpoint the why in brands. Why would the customers benefit from being engaged with your brand? And he did it just on a beautiful, beautiful level. So with you, make sure you have that why. Make sure that speaks directly to the customers. And make sure you change it and you relook at it every single 6 months. If you want to be fanatical, look at it every 3 or 4 months. If you want to be a little bit lazy, or maybe you're busy doing other things, look at it every 12 months. But never, ever leave it beyond 12 months. I love brand, as you can possibly imagine. So let's go back again. It's hard to listen. It's hard for me to listen to me speak for 45 minutes. So I imagine it's really hard for you. So I'm just trying to mix it up a little bit rather than just continually push it through with the same following. So I'm going to go back to a few more of the influence levels that we use as a company with all of the startups as they come through. And I mentioned a book. I think books are great. Don't do one if you don't have anything to say. But if you have something to say, then books are phenomenal. And you can start it, by the way, if you have a content marketing funnel. We're going to talk about that in a second. But if you have a content marketing funnel, you can actually start it by just having it as the ebook at the beginning of your content marketing funnel. You can start there. Because you know what it shows? It shows domain expertise. It shows that you know what you're talking about. If you want to move into the big leagues, then maybe self-publish a book. I highly respect people who do that. Or you could even look and try and see if you could do something a little bit different. Maybe go to an actual publisher and get a publisher to do a book for you. If I've had, my wife's done 4 books with Simon & Schuster and other really good publishing houses, and it's definitely very possible to be able to do those things yourself. But if not, don't worry. And by the way, you don't need to do this on the first day. I actually encourage you something in the business. And actually, it was a kind of an interesting story, because when I started Expert Dojo, I knew we loved entrepreneurs, but I also knew that we hated anybody who manipulates entrepreneurs. And at that time, I felt that investors had a lot to answer for just based on the manipulation that they had done within the space. We only have to look at Uber and Lyft and Amazon and all the other huge unicorns that have received so much money to understand that this is a problem. So I spoke to a friend one day, and I said to my friend said to me, what's the one thing that could really destroy Expert Dojo? And I said, mate, if I really told the true story about what it is that we think, it could take us down. Because I believe that institutional investors, venture capitalists, equity funds, banks on some level as well, I believe that it's a racist, sexist, elitist institution that discriminates against the very greatest entrepreneurs we have, and actually takes away from us being, I would say, a great entrepreneurship country, because we end up giving it to a bunch of overprivileged young white boys who just happen to have gone to the right school. So I don't want to overgeneralize. I'm sure there's some good entrepreneurs, but there was certainly a trend in that space. And he said to me, well, if that's what you feel, if you really believe that can destroy your business, you need to talk about that, because that's your brand story. And if you start off your business not telling the truth about what you really feel, placating to people without confronting an obvious situation, you will never, ever get through to the people you want to do. So I did a TEDx talk. A TEDx talk is called The Kidnapping of the American Dream by Mac Mahon. I don't suggest you look at it because I'm a great speaker or because it was a great TEDx talk or anything else, but it's very, very interesting if you want to understand how to get your brand message across. Because on one side of it, you would probably look at the talk and say, man, what were you doing? Like, this message is so against the very people that you desperately need to be on your side. Like, why would you do that if you could end up losing those people at the beginning? Because, by the way, if we don't have investors for our startups, then we don't have startups. It just ends, which means Expert Dojo doesn't exist, which means me telling the true brand story could have collapsed my business. But you know what happened? We had, and I would say, forget we, me personally, I had around 60, 70 institutional investors who were my friends. Just because they did business a certain way doesn't mean that they're not nice people to have a beer with in the bar in the evening, or not nice to have a game of tennis with or a bit of fun with. I just didn't like the way business was done. After I did the talk, I had about 300 investors who became my friends. Bizarre, right? Bizarre. I told my brand story digitally because everybody saw it online. And what happened was, even though that brand story was against the people that I needed, those people rallied around me. And they rallied around me and said, Brian, we don't wake up in the morning wanting to be racist or sexist or elitist. It just so happens that that's where our pool is to fish for entrepreneurs. But look, if you can give us better entrepreneurs and you can give us better value propositions, better product fits, then we will listen to you and we will listen to your entrepreneurs. And what's happened is exactly that. We now have 60% of the companies who are coming through Expert Dojo are female-led companies. I looked around at our table the other night at a venture capital event, and we had 11 entrepreneurs at the table, and there were 7 of those entrepreneurs were women entrepreneurs. And I remember thinking, God, I wonder would this have been the case if I had just placated to people who would have been good for my business at the beginning. And I challenge you to do this. And by the way, if my friend JP had not made me do this, would I have done it? I don't know. But I do know it is probably the one thing that I have done with Expert Dojo over the last 4 years that has made a bigger impact, both with people wanting to work with me, companies coming into our cohort, and investors wanting to be a part of Expert Dojo. Don't be afraid of your authentic brand message. And it's a huge takeaway for today. Most of us are taught not to say things that will get us into trouble. Like our moms and dads are talking and we say, hey, and they say, no, shut up, don't talk, let us finish. And we go, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And we're in school and we really want to ask something and they say, stop, I didn't tell you it was time for questions. And we're like, oh, okay, we won't. And all the way through, if we're working in a job, it's exactly the same. We're taught to obey. And in this one particular case, especially as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneurial company, you have a duty to do the opposite. And that is to be true to your unique brand message. It's beautiful. When you do it, it's just the greatest thing in the world. And then it aligns all of those things. And look at what it did for me. My influence level now, there's not a person in the early stage startup community anywhere in the Los Angeles area who's more recognizable than I am. And I say that only to make a really important point. All of these blocks on top of each other become a really important castle that you're building. Now look at what I'm doing here today. Today I'm on this conference, feeding it through India, people all around the world listening to it and watching it. This afternoon I'm up in Atlantic City, which I flew to last night on a red eye. Before I flew up here in a red eye, I was with 40 or 50 venture investors, talking to them as well. So conferences, and I mentioned earlier on about speaking at events, but actually going out and speaking at conferences is tremendously valuable. And I always remember the first conference I spoke at. And again, it's all about storytelling. All of this is storytelling, because as I'm speaking at a conference, my unique storytelling message has to come out. Even as I'm here on this conference, like this is not a 15-slide presentation that I'm going to read for you. That's not my brand. That's not my storytelling message. My storytelling message is to come on to you and authentically try and help transfer as much information as I possibly can with as much benefit to you. Now, some people I will do that for. There are other people that I will not do that for, but I will try and do it for everyone. And that's my authentic brand. So when you're looking for your authentic brand and you're at these conferences, focus less on trying to give a perfect presentation and everybody thinking that you're the greatest presenter in the world. Focus more on trying to make sure that those little bits of content that you have that are so incredibly important, that you get it out to the world. You get those people in the audience, even if it's just one person, that they walk away transformed based on what you've brought to the table. Tremendously, tremendously powerful. I think I speak now at 10, 12 conferences a month. But the very first conference I spoke at, I had no right being there. I just reached out to dozens and dozens and dozens of conference organizers. And I said, look, I've got something to talk about. And I think I'd be valuable. And I may not be good as a lone speaker, but I will be great on a panel. I will make sure that your panel is the most exciting panel that you can possibly imagine. And then what happened? I just got one conference. And then 2 months later, I got another couple of conferences. And then 6 months later, I got another couple. But I never stopped outreach, and I never stopped giving my authentic storytelling message at every single one. So again, for all of you out there, large corporations, small corporations, use conferences to get your storytelling message out. In a case like this, and even this afternoon when it was a physical conference that I was at, and I was speaking about blockchain and cryptocurrency and how it's changing the world, everything is being streamed. Everything is being streamed. So you got to make sure that happens. Another area that I really worked hard on, and I encourage you when you're getting your message out, is rather than just do one video and send that video out and then hope that people understand what you do or what you're all about, try and break it down into segments. Like even if you do something like 30 short videos and then you send them out and have them pushed out over 30 days, and that 30 days then has an exact brand message which then gets out to the world as well. So I love storytelling through 10, 15-second videos, which I then send out to multiple people, so then all of those people are able to actually then get direct access to absolutely everything that I have on a very, very, very simple and straightforward basis. So make sure on the video side that you're using it, to do storytelling. Instagram is super for it, but these days you can do it on pretty much any level. Let's go to another one. Live streaming. We live stream everything. We live stream thoughts we're having during the day, and we don't just do it in one or two places. We use live streaming for all our digital storytelling. We love Twitch. For example, we felt that entrepreneurship is like a cage fight every day, especially early stage entrepreneurship. So we created this competition where we would give away $50,000 in cash prize investments. But people would need to come into a virtual cage, and they would need to pitch their competition. They would pitch against somebody else, and it was just a lot of fun. But it was, again, very aligned with our brand message. So I have more. Look, I could talk to you about brand message, and I could talk to you about storytelling, and I could talk to you about like all of the different ways to do it. I really, on some levels, I don't want to give you so much that you just get ridiculously overwhelmed with it. And I also don't want to take away from the really, really important messages that we're looking at here. So what are those messages? Be authentic. Be who you are. This life is so short for people to be trying to wonder what the best brand would be for the best audience. If you're trying to work out what your best brand or your best authentic message should be for the best audience, then my suggestion is you need to get a different brand. Okay? Let's look at some more. Let's also take the fact of change your brand every single 6 months if you possibly can. If it needs to be changed, but at least ask your consumers what your consumers think about your brand, so you have that all lined up as well. Make sure that you're really consistent with your brand and your storytelling. Don't just do storytelling once and then leave it and then come back to it afterwards and then leave it and come back afterwards. Build it into a roadmap whereby people have it all tied up. So I think we have a lot. I want to take a pause. You've just seen a guy talk for 45 minutes without a pause. And that's because I'm Irish. It kind of ties into what we do. But I want to see if we have any questions that we would like to ask. Anything that you want to put in here. I'm very, very happy to give you some feedback.
Okay, participants, like as Mr. Brian said, like you can put up the questions on chat box, or else you can click on raise hand button in the Adobe, so that you can get connected with Ms. Brian, and then you can get clarified whatever queries you have regarding digital storytelling and future marketing. So Daryl asks, how can you use storytelling in less branding related ways?
So, okay, it's a really hard question because I live by brand. I wake up in the morning and the only thing I think about is brand all of the time, and is my brand authentic with the stories I give? And I'll tell you why I stick like that. So firstly, look, you can be anywhere with anyone using a story to build to it. But whenever we sit down in our groups and we're looking at trying to make sure that we have the right storytelling, every single time we reverted back to our brand. So let me give you an example. And by the way, this is not a black and white answer. It's a really interesting question because our brand, in many cases, is our company brand, and our storytelling is our personal abilities to do storytelling. And sometimes, we can confuse one with the other, and especially if it's a large company, and especially if the storytelling is coming from people who are employees. But I can tell you, like when we were doing the cage fight competition, it was something very personal to me because I see early stage entrepreneurs every single day dying because they don't get access to the investment or the help or whatever to make them succeed. And for me, it is a fist fight. It's a cage fight. And then it doesn't matter if it's a girl or a guy. It's exactly what it is. And then we had to create a story which actually showed a cage fighter and how a cage fighter had gone through, and it was a woman cage fighter, and how she broke through barriers and came up. And then one of the guys in our group said, well, why don't we get this man who's wearing a suit and a tie, and he's got boxing gloves, and on the front of the boxing gloves it says Expert DOJO, and on the other side of it it said compete in our competition. And we had this huge internal argument about whether we should use this or not, because as a story, it's a nice story. Like it paints this picture of a very handsome man who's got his tie and he's got his shirt, and people can relate to it, and it will bring people to the competition. It'll bring more people to the competition because we know we can get people from the job market who will relate to the picture. But it's not our authentic brand. So I couldn't let us do it. It had to be cage fighting, because cage fighting is authentic brand. That's what we believe that entrepreneurs will do. So look, can you do storytelling without an authentic brand? You can, of course. Many companies do. Most companies do. However, take Patagonia, take Tom's Shoes, take Virgin Atlantic, take our Nike. Never, ever, ever will you see them doing storytelling which is outside their brand. It's always inside their brand. It always fits their brand and looks like it. And whenever we're building our storytelling, we will never do storytelling before we do brand. We have this really great brand exercise, which I will share with everyone. If you email me just at brian@expertdojo.com, I'll send it over. But it looks at internal and external questions of what do our customers look like. And I'm going to give you just a really, really great example of how it ties it back in. And I'm sorry, Daryl, if I'm making this more about brand than storytelling. But one of the questions was, what is the personality of your customers? And we have like 70 questions. Very standard, awesome branding document. But we use it for the storytelling. And we were looking at this for a stylist. And the stylist has got their customers pay between $40,000 and $60,000 a month on clothing. So when we first looked at that question, we said the personality is they are well-cultured, they are aware, they are well-traveled, they are great conversations, they're high-level people, they hang out in good circles. And when we really questioned the brand, we realized that's not quite the case. And this is no disrespect to people who spend $40,000 a month on clothing, but we said they are egotistical, they are selfish, they are envious, they are aware of what other people are doing. Some are shallow, some are self-centered. But it was important for us to know this because we wanted to create a story that aligned with what our consumers wanted. And how that ended up looking was, rather than us building a website for this company that looked like a Coco Chanel website, we built a website that literally had 3 things on it. It was a black page, it had gold gates, and it had a line in the middle of the gates that said, if you have found this website and you do not have a password, then you are at the wrong website. Oh, I love this thing. So content marketing, brand is my favorite thing in the world. Content marketing is my second favorite thing in the world. I love content marketing because it's the true storytelling. If you don't use content marketing, which means having a predictive marketing funnel with a brand story built into your marketing funnel, you are lost. You have to do it. Now, those of us who live in the content marketing world, obviously you're going to say, yeah, duh, Brian, I know. Content marketing rocks. But I promise you, there's one or two people on this call right now, and you haven't built in a predictive funnel with your brand, with your storytelling in there. So we build our one, which has got, you'll come in at the beginning, and then you'll make sure that there's a really nice book, which, let's say it's Find Investment, which most of our entrepreneurs want. So there's a book on Find Investment. And then immediately after that, we'll go into talking about, I think the second one has got my TEDx talk, because we want to create credibility. The one before that talks a little bit about finding investment and where they should look and what they should do with investors. Then the next one after that then goes into testimonials from people about areas that they really like us. And then the next one goes after that. We'll go directly into a story of a lady who came through Expert Dojo who pitched 200 investors. 200! It is like the saddest, happiest story ever for an awesome person. And the only investors who didn't say no were the investors who were trying to hit on her. Like, it was just nasty for 8 or 9 months. And then one day, a lady called Jessie Draper, who's the daughter of Tim Draper, came in and said to this woman, I love what you do and I'm putting investment into you. And within 2 days, she raised $2.5 million when she was only looking for $1.5 million. And then all these stories came from this, and she did a video, and that video then, it did a couple of things for our brand, for the story, and for her as well. Was it made people like us more, it made people empathize with us more, it made people like the entrepreneur more, it made people feel like they had a chance, even through the impossible path that is entrepreneurship. So I love content marketing. I love when content marketing is absolutely tied into stories. I love when brands change their content marketing on a monthly basis to make sure that your stories are absolutely perfect. It's a great question. I love it. Do we have another one there? How do we make use of digital information and user-generated content? Oh my God, yeah, it's awesome. We do, so I didn't mention podcasts yet. Okay, so my favorite marketing is actually not content. I tell a lie. It used to be content marketing. My favorite marketing is podcasting. I love podcasting. I use it as a way so that we can bring in really high-level people in the investment community. We created this podcast called The Art of Startup War. And then what we would do is we would bring in our investors, and we would get our investors to the podcast, and we would do an interview with them beforehand. We would put that interview up on LinkedIn. The interview would talk about like how much they cared about the startups and that they wanted to help them, and they had no vested interest in doing this except for them wanting startups to learn. And then that tied directly into making sure that they could then do the podcast, and the podcast got promoted as well. So use user-generated as much as you can. It's beautiful. We would then tag not only all of the other investors in the podcast, we would also tag all of the startups in our community, and we would say to our startups, we want you to pass it around. We would then bring our startups in, and on the Apple TV station we created, which is also really easy to create, the startups would then talk about their story, and again, we would pass that around. And that's what creating a community is around. And actually, I haven't really spoken about community because it's not really that type of talk, but I do believe that if you can get your users really acting like a community, you got it. Like, you've just got it. But they have to feel like there's a benefit for themselves. And there's nothing like in our world, a startup having a story about how epic they are being shared with another 50 or 60 startups, because then everybody else wants the same thing. It becomes a self-perpetuating prophecy. Good questions to lead to great storytelling. Hey, Michael, do you mind elaborating on that a little bit and just tell me what you're looking for? I'm not quite sure. It looks like good stories lead. Anyway, yeah, please, if you don't mind, maybe write a little bit of a longer comment on that. And I'm very, very, very happy to answer it. I have to say, look, for us, our storytelling really becomes part of what we do every single day. This is really hard for me because I'm going to tell you not to plan, even though I believe deeply in planning. But whenever I'm storytelling, I never plan. So I didn't plan a list of 720 things to talk to you about today. I didn't, because that's not me. That's not how I storytell. I came here with knowledge that I've generated over the years, and then I knew that to get to a place where you could feel that we're, at least for my truth is, we're that influence plus brand equals storytelling. maybe influence plus brand plus storytelling equals an amazing company. Right? That's where I am, and I can't do that if I'm just reading slides. Or when I came to the blockchain conference earlier on today, and I spoke about like how I feel about blockchain, my storytelling has a basic outline structure to it, and it will normally start with credibility, and then it will normally lead into a massive problem that's been faced in the market, and then it will normally kind of follow through to me having 3 or 4 salient points that I'll move forward back from. So do I have if you're asking, like, is there normally a good question at the beginning of storytelling? I think the good question is the brand, you know, and the brand itself will tell me what my consumers really like and what they care about. Great questions, though. I love the questions. Very good. And I think, you know, maybe
Participants, like if you have any other queries also, you can mention your queries in the chat box. And then Mr. Brian, you can mention your official mail ID also, so that in case like participants need to touch with you in person and then ask for the queries regarding digital storytelling, they can connect up with you, so that will be useful for them also.
I'll do that. I'll finish just in closing in the last minute or two. Firstly, anyone can contact me, as I mentioned earlier, at brian@expertdojo.com, BRIAN @expert, EXPERT, dojo.com. And you can see my TEDx talk, obviously the Kidnapping of the American Dream, which is under my name as well. And I'll tell you, look, I've been doing marketing for 30 years on one guise or another. Yeah, 30 years, maybe 28 years on one guise or another. And it used to be really simple. It used to be that we would just send stuff out in the mail, right, in the post, as they say over in England, right? And then they'd receive all of the letters and they'd look at it. And that was our version of storytelling. And then maybe we would send more and more postcards, and then we would telemarket people to try and get them to come in. And then after that, it became easier, right? We had Google and we had Facebook, and it was the early days, and you could nail it on both of those platforms because it was so early and so few people were in. It was one of the things that I respected Gary Vaynerchuk for the most, because he got it. But we're now in a really confusing time, because most great marketers know that unless you've got a really unique product or you're very early in an industry, you ain't going to make any money from Facebook. You're probably not even going to make any money from retargeting. The only area you're going to make money is by capturing the leads on Facebook, then maybe retargeting them, and then getting their email addresses so that you can get in direct contact with them. And when you have your email addresses, that's when your story begins. So embrace the fact that we're in a new world of marketing. And that new world of marketing means that content marketing, whether it's podcasting, whether it's actual predictive emails that get sent out, which is built in an automated funnel, whether it's events that you go to, conferences that you speak at, posts that you make on platforms which are terribly important. This is the new marketing reality that we face. And either you have a great story to tell, which can be repeated, but it should be just specific for the audience that you're speaking to, or you don't. And if you don't have a great story to tell,
yeah, thank you, Mr. Brian. That is real storytelling which helps out all digital marketers out there. Thank you for delivering all the realistic information that you had. Thank you for joining us the session, Mr. Brian. That is very much a pleasure to have with you the session or the third day of the conference. Thank you.